Welcome once again to Breakfast Central. Now, amidst the ongoing protest in Kenya, intruders yesterday invaded a farm in Ruiru County that is linked to former President Uhuru Kenyatta's family. The armed intruders cut down trees using power saws and made away with an unknown number of livestock before setting a section of the farm on fire.
The motive of the attack is yet to be established, but sources say the Kenya Kwanza leaders have been blaming the former president for supporting the current Azimio Wing protests. The over 11,000-acre farm was set to host a real estate haven that included low and high income residential areas, an agricultural zone, industrial area and schools, and it is estimated that the ambitious project will cost up to 500 billion shillings and with a population of at least 250,000 people. Your thoughts on this?
Well, like you said, violence is never restricted to one side, of the coin. It eventually will spread across, and once again, and of course, it's important that people's right to protest is respected in Kenya, no doubt. But protesters also need to know when they might be taking it too far. At some point, you're gonna really have to ask what exactly is the motive behind the protesting.
Absolutely.
What exactly are you trying to achieve? If you're complaining about the cost of living and the economy and some of all those things in Kenya, how does burning property, send a message? How does burning property fix that? How does burning property of the former president's family fix that? It doesn't in any way. So it's really, but in every protest, you would see people who express their anger. Yeah. Yes, there are people who will hijack it. There's also people who express their anger and frustration beyond what the protest was originally meant, or termed.
What it was intended to achieve. I mean, it's quite an unfortunate situation, and like we said, but some of the concerns. Okay, I'd like to quickly reward that rather than calling it protest, the Constitution does make provision for peaceful protests, right? But unfortunately, this then results into violence. And what really is the goal? And there have been questions as to what the motive is. Is it really to protest the high cost of living, or is there a political power on the play going on here?
It's starting to look like the latter at this point.
Anyway, let's move away from there and head over to South Africa.
Yeah. Now, the plot has thickened in the dramatic tale of a South African prisoner who faked his death in a fire and escaped last year. Thabo Bester, who's a convicted rapist, has been living a high life in the luxury suburbs of Johannesburg with his family after escaping prison.
Now, details have emerged that high-ranking government officials were aware of the escape and that the security company guarding the prison was also allegedly in on it. Police have in the meantime called on the public for leads on the whereabouts of Bester, who is living his best life allegedly. Joining us this morning is South African freelance investigative journalist Oliver Meth. Good morning, Oliver. Thank you very much for joining us.
For having me.
Oliver, we need you to unmute your device. I think it's currently muted.
All right, he has. So, Oliver, whilst we're getting the audio sorted, I think that it's important that we have a conversation about Thabo Bester, and it's a very unfortunate conversation to have, especially as we wrap up or get counting down to the end of Women's Month. Just between October and December of last year, about 12,000 rape cases were reported, and Thabo Bester is someone who was very notorious in this regard. So let's take a step back, and we'd like you to help us understand. It was alleged that Thabo Bester's body was found charred in his cell in May last year. But now there have been reports of him living his best life on social media and posting pictures of living affluently. What really is going on?
Yeah. So last year, May, the Department of Correctional Services had released a statement confirming the supposed demise of Thabo Bester. It was alleged that he had set himself alight at the Mangaung maximum prison, where he had been serving 75 years with 2 life sentences running concurrently for his convictions of rape and murder. So we do understand that Thabo Bester went on a killing spree and raping numerous women between 2011 until he was apprehended in 2012. What we've now come to understand through our investigations is that ideally, the fire that erupted on the early morning of the 3rd of May 2002 was actually used as a decoy to assist Thabo Bester to escape. Now, DNA and forensic evidence has been obtained through ground up which is the news agency that has been doing a series of these articles. And the DNA that's been obtained is twofold, and this is why we think it's quite evident that it's safe for us to say that it's no longer alleged that he escaped from prison, and it's no longer alleged that he had died in the fire. But the DNA now proves, firstly, that the body that was found in the cell was not that of Thabo Bester's, and we've managed to identify that in various ways. So the coroner report that we've managed to obtain firstly states that the body that was found in that cell 35 at the Mangaung prison was 25 centimeters shorter than what prison officials had recorded when Thabo Bester was apprehended. The correctional services records show that Thabo Bester was at least 175 centimeters. So that was the first red flag for us to dig deeper. Secondly, the person who we now understand to be his biological mother last year had tried to claim the body from prison officials, and the DNA that she had done with the body that was found within that cell did not match that of hers, which was another red flag for us to start then digging deeper. And all the circumstantial evidence that we've collected over the past 3 weeks also show that there's been CCTV footage from the prison on the night of the fire, where we can clearly see two adult figures, one of a female and one of a male, hastily running towards the prison exit on the night that fire had erupted. We do suspect that it was Dr. Nandipa and Thabo Bester at that stage escaping prison with the assistance of those officials at the Mangaung prison cell.
Wow.
All right. Pretty interesting there. You probably will only see this in a movie. But now let's talk about, how this could possibly have happened. Is there a, history of some level of corruption in the South African prison system? And of course, what questions must be asked, over here? Because I'm also seeing that the South African police is promising that there will be investigation, and they're also seeking public support in the rearrest of Thabo Bester. But, is that a policing system that can be trusted in the first place? Because they, first of all, might be guilty here of letting him escape or enabling his escape.
So there's a lot of questions, and we aren't getting the necessary answers from the relevant police forces. So we do understand that the prison is a public-private partnership that government has gone into with G4S Security. So G4S Security ideally is responsible for the operation and administration within that prison. There's been a bit of a blame shift between Correctional Services and G4S. Ideally, Correctional Services has now come out to actually admit that the body that was found in the cell is that of Thabo Bester. For the past year, they've been denying and sticking to their guns, saying that the body that was found was that of Thabo Bester's. And now, because the DNA evidence has been supplied to them, they have now changed their tone. But ironically, just yesterday, the security company, G4S, released a statement saying that according to their own internal investigations at the Mangaung prison, they are quite adamant that that's the body of Thabo Bester, and will be engaging with their legal team to take up the issue and debacle around the threat that the department, that the Correctional Service Department has now made to revoke their contract. So it does raise a lot of questions, particularly around G4S's operation. We know that since 2013 at this particular prison, there's been at least 138 cases of human rights violations lodged by inmates against G4S security officials for torture and for also killing inmates. And we know that at least 18 in the same month of May last year that Thabo Bester had supposedly demised in his cell. At least 18 inmates were unaccounted for with prison. So there is speculation that because the coroner report shows that the body that was found already had internal organs decomposing and could have been dead at least a week before the fire erupted, and the cause of that death was not through smoke inhalation. So we do suspect, and we're hoping that possibly by this weekend we could actually publish something around this, was that the body could have been planted there from outside, or could have been one of the inmates who had been killed within that month as part of the 18 unclaimed bodies and planted in there as a decoy. We also know that the CCTV footage in that corridor where Thabo Bester was hosted was actually off on that night. So what we've now come to understand is that at least 3 prison officials have been suspended for breaking protocol on the day. There's also new evidence that we also published this weekend around the fact that Thabo Bester lived what we would now term a jail for stay lavish lifestyle, where he was bankrolling various prison officials linked to high-profile government and business people within society. We do know that through the evidence that we've also obtained is that he was actually running a multi-million rand scam operation from inside prison. And through the evidence that we've managed to gain is that in July of 2018, he managed to join a Zoom video conferencing, alleging to be based in New York, posing as a director of the 21st Century Media Company, under a different alias as Tom Motsepe, but claims that he had been connected to one of South Africa's richest families, the Motsepes, and he had probing investors to invest into his company, for him to ideally roll out social development programming and the rollout of ARVs in various South African communities. So we do know that that's how he managed to accumulate his wealth. And through accumulating that wealth, he was able to buy himself status and power, bankroll various officials within the prison, and ideally orchestrate this elaborate escape.
Oliver, these revelations are shocking, to put it quite mildly. This is a man who was sentenced in 2012 for rape, murder and robbery. And does this in some way reflect the value system that South Africa places on the lives of women? Also, I'd like to ask, are there expectations that there will be actual punitive measures, not just suspension? You've mentioned how 3 prison officials have been suspended, that there would actually be people who will be held accountable. Do South Africans trust that the government will be able to get to the root of this matter and that justice will be done?
Yeah. So we are expecting an internal investigative report to be done by Correctional Services to be released today, as they had promised. But after speaking to them yesterday, what we do understand is that the working relations between G4S and Correctional Services have actually soured. And ideally, this could cause a further delay to the expected report that's due to be handed to both the Minister of Police and Minister of Justice, and ideally then tabled before the Parliamentary Committee. So we do anticipate that that report will give us much more revelations in terms of what transpired on that night, and if any actions would be taken against those that have been implicated in that report. But personally, I don't think that the report would be sufficient, because at this stage it's actually contradicting messaging from both the entity that runs the operations within the prison, right, and Correctional Service only have flouted their own mandatory responsibility around oversight within that prison. Oh, so I have really any accountability would take place. And it's also unclear what the scope of that investigation would be like.
Oliver, it's an unfortunate situation and a reflection in some way about of how there's a porous system there when it comes to the prison service, and also we need to prioritize the safety of women. If someone whose existence threatens the safety of women is let on the loose, what does that say about South Africa and how it sees women? Oliver, would like to have you join us again when we get some more update on this story, but thank you very much for making our time for us this morning.